And what's going on, everybody? This is Vinny Milletti with Milletti Law, the strongest name in law. Don't mind me in my white tank top. I had to go out for a meeting earlier, and I'm home, and I want to be out of my outfit and clothing, out of my legal clothing. Okay. So in today's episode, well, first of all, number one, the date now is November 15th. This is Vincent Milletti with Milletti Law. I am the founder, owner, partner, leader, Mac Daddy, God King, everything ruling of the law office of Vincent Milletti. The website is www.millettilaw.com. That's www.millettilaw.com, MILETTILAW.com. Go to the website, sign up to the newsletter so you can be in the know. You can get weekly updates, daily updates. I have stuff coming out. We have content delivered all the time. So certainly be in the know and with everything that's going on in life around us. Also, make sure you subscribe on this YouTube channel. Right now, we're trying to obviously build subscribers. The more subscribers we have, the more we're able to brand and the more reach we're able to make out on here. So, it's a very exciting thing. So please subscribe, tell your friends, tell your kids, tell your family members. I don't care who you tell, but somebody needs to click subscribe and make this thing happen. All right. So let's get down to it. So I just kind of wanted to take a quick moment to speak about non-competes, right? About prior employers restricting your ability to, restricting your ability to work for a subsequent employer. So this is becoming, we've had this conversation in the past. I feel like this is becoming more and more popular. It's becoming something that's just happening over and over because, as we become more of like a technologically advanced society, every employer thinks they have, the right key, the right stuff that gives them a competitive advantage over everybody else. So therefore, they always want to keep their things separate and confidential. Also, at the same time, they don't want you to take what you learned from them to another employer and in a similar industry to compete with them to harm them. So that's the whole non-compete portion of it. They don't want you to go to a competitor and then essentially help that competitor do well and take what you learned from your prior company to your new company, right? So the question becomes, well, what happens with non-competes, right? We had a situation over the weekend where somebody didn't have like a true non-compete, had just kind of like a provision basically in like an offer letter or something. But then the same thing, it wasn't a contractual offer letter. It was just an offer letter identifying your employment, but at the same time saying that, okay, well, you can't compete. We would expect you to, it's illegal for you to have two jobs or whatever the case is. Had some kind of language. Listen, I represent employers most of the time. Lately, I'm doing more plaintiff side work just because it comes up. But whatever, I usually represent employers. I will tell you right now, when it comes to a non-compete, okay, in order to ensure their enforceability, one, it's got to be in a writing, right? I mean, first of all, number one, it can't be just one stray sentence inside of an offer letter that you at the same time say has no contractual binding powers. That you're saying this does not create an offer of employment, this does not create a contract for employment, because I mean, then that's, I don't know, what does that mean? That's like writing it on a Bazooka Joe wrapper. There's no enforcement, nobody signing, there's no mutual assent, whatever. It's just identifying them, That'd be like, I don't know, saying, hey, well, I have my job offer, and the job offer, it says you can only work for us, online at monster.com or whatever the case is. It doesn't create any mutual assent. There's no agreement between the parties, so it's not a contract. So, okay, number one, your non-compete should always be, if you're an employer, if you want to have this thing to be enforceable, your non-compete should always be in a separate writing. It should be something that is clearly seen, is clear, conspicuous. The employee or prospective employee sees it and signs off on it and agrees to it and checks the box, okay? Now, your non-compete needs to have the following four characteristics in order for any court to enforce it. So in our situation, we had somebody that didn't have a true non-compete. It was very flimsy. It was one sentence. And it was literally like written like in an offer letter that wasn't even a binding contract. It was just literally like just a one straight common sentence on an offer letter. That is never going to be enforceable. That's just simply not going to be enforceable. It's just not. It's not going to be. It's going to have no effect. It doesn't even meet any qualifications for a contract. So look, you want it in a writing, but here's the big four things, right? One, your restriction, the employer's restriction has to be reasonable in time and geographic scope. So meaning that you can't restrict them from employment for 10 years. You can't restrict them from employment for 5 years. Like unless they're working for NASA, and they have tremendous amounts of proprietary, confidential, nation-building information, that's a different ballgame. But for the most part, you're not working for NASA. You're probably working for, like, I don't know, Walmart, right? So you're probably a purchaser for Walmart or something. So the first step is the restriction has to be reasonable in time and geographic scope. geographic scope. I've seen 10-mile radiuses. I've seen 20. I've seen up to 50-mile radiuses. 50 miles high, especially if you live in New York. 50-mile radius is high, especially if you live in New York. So I would think twice about something as long as that. The restriction. So the second part, you want the restriction to be necessary to protect a legitimate interest. So what does that mean? That the employer legitimately had put some confidential information in your hands that can give somebody else a benefit. So let's say if you're a janitor, janitors do not have NDA. Janitors do not have non-competes. The way you mop hospital A is not giving any competitive advantage to how you're going to mop hospital B, or how hospital B is going to perform in the market based on how you're mopping. So the second element is that the restriction has to be necessary to protect the legitimate interest of the employer. The third element is that the restriction can't be unnecessarily burdensome to the employees. This goes back to the time of geographical scope. This goes back to, this also is going to say the scope, essentially, of what you're restricting. So if it's an e-commerce company, if you're restricting all of e-commerce, that's not going to be helpful. It should be narrow as possible. So for instance, let's say if you work for Walmart and you're a purchaser, I don't know why I'm picking on Walmart. Let's say you work for Walmart and you're a purchaser, and Walmart wants to give you an NDA. They shouldn't restrict it to everything having to do in the world with e-commerce. Let's say you only buy boats. I don't know, you only buy boat products, right? You only buy aftermarket parts for boats or something. The restriction might be solely limited to that industry. Like, that would make more sense because that's reasonable. But all of e-commerce isn't reasonable, right? So the restriction can't be unnecessarily burdensome to the employee. That's the third part. The fourth part is that the restriction can't be harmful to the general public outright. So let's say, and that's kind of that doesn't come up often, but and kind of like common sense will tell you, just not being able to work is kind of harmful to the general public, right? Because then what? You become a ward of the state, right? You go on welfare, you do weird things for money. I don't know. So that one's a little bit more difficult to talk about. But let's just say, for instance, you worked at a pharmaceutical with COVID, right? You worked at a pharmaceutical company, and you were developing this fantastic drug that could cure COVID like this in a second, I mean, that's really proprietary, but what if you wanted to try it in court and, you wanted to fight on that? I mean, I would argue, I'd say, hey, I mean, not releasing that information may be harmful to the general public, because, I mean, let's say if it's something that can cure COVID immediately, I don't know, maybe it's worth it, right? Maybe it's worth disclosing. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's worth sharing that data with somebody else if you don't get along with this employer. So I mean, that is the hardest one, though. It's a very hard one to show. So yeah, so just again, your 4 elements, right? Whatever the restriction is going to be, it must be element 1, it must be reasonable time and geographic scope. 2, it must be necessary to protect the legitimate interest of the employer. 3, it must not be unreasonably burdensome to the employee. And number 4, the restriction must not be harmful to the general public. Then there's another little caveat I just want to walk into. What does it mean to have a legitimate interest, right? So, legitimate interest of the employer. A couple of courts take these on a case by case basis. There's no let's say statutory guidance that just says, okay, if you fall into these elements, those are legitimate interest. But I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, protecting goodwill, customer relationships, customer list, right? If you're a salesperson, having your customer list, just disclosing it is going to be a big problem. I documented here that trade secrets, that's important. I mean, that should be pretty obvious, right? If you have something that let's say you have something that you're working on patenting, and you have an item that you're working on patenting, and your company hasn't gotten to it yet, right? That's a confidential trade secret that should not be disclosed and should be subject to some kind of confidentiality. Let's say extraordinary, unique services, that are limited. Let's say, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Unique or extraordinary services of the employee. Let's say the employee has a particular way they bind carpets, right? And that the way they bind carpets is super strong, and only that company teaches it to people, and only that company knows about it. That's kind of a unique, extraordinary service that is worth protecting, a legitimate interest worth protecting. Obviously financials, all your norms, are your financials, your business game plans, your marketing material, your business plans going forward. All that stuff is that's the common sense legitimate interest stuff. So just have to keep in mind legitimate interest, that when we're going back to our 4 qualities, that you protect the legitimate interest. The case law is showing you're protecting goodwill of the company, protecting customer relationships, protecting confidential information like customer list, proprietary information is in like business plans going forward, trade secrets, unique things, maybe like patents that you haven't gotten able to patent yet, and maybe unique or extraordinary services. Maybe this company has a particular way they make secret sauce, or a particular way they bind rugs. All that stuff is those items are fall in the legitimate interest. So just to wrap this up and conclude, going back to the issue that we ran into over the weekend, that in that particular instance there was no agreement on its face, and there was essentially no non-compete on its face, so that would fall through. And the HR director in that matter that had said, it's illegal for you to work for another employer, based on just one stray line in an offer letter that had no binding strength. That is a bad call by the employer, and the employer should call the law office of Vincent Maletti and should have me create an onboarding package for them that will protect their interest. That employer doesn't know who I am, but hopefully they come across this video and they call me, and I will create a great onboarding package for them for $1,500 for the company that will protect their interest with 5 or 6 key documents. So, and look at me giving up my prices online and stuff, because none of you attorneys do this. And then you all people still call me and tell me how high my prices are anyway. Please. I give the best rate out there. That's me ranting though. So hopefully this was informative. Hopefully you're able to use the information here. No problem. Obviously it's all free here. This is free content we kick out. If you have any questions, obviously call me. Go to the website. Our numbers are on there. You can leave a comment in the box below. You can drop us an email. You can reach the contact us page. You can go on my Facebook page. You can go on my Instagram page. We have a million ways for you to catch me. Catch all of us here. Somebody will get back to you momentarily. And, as always, look, yours and Law's love and lifts. This is Maletti Law. Again, subscribe, join the newsletter, and have a beautiful day, and we will see you going forward.